Exactly.
I was saying that I just finished reviewing the Abbas DAC, ABBAS, and
Yep.
I posted that on SBAP. So that's an interesting DAC. It's from the Ukraine. The guy uses like really like I would say bespoke, but I'm actually gonna say esoteric. He uses like old film caps. He's got old wiring from Western Electric, like 1920s in there. Like he's just got weird stuff going on. It's got five tubes. It's got a tube on like every stage, which you'd expect to sound like ultra bloomy and wet and like super gooey and tubey for a DAC, because tube DACs typically, especially NOS tube DACs, are a bit weird like that. But yeah, no, it didn't sound anything like that. So it was actually quite pleasant and quite good. And then the other DAC I have is this weird Korean DAC, Woversa DAC 3C. And that DAC is actually not that great, and I'm having lots of problems with it. It has some interesting features. They have a tube setting that you have to pay extra for, which is like firmware that they put in it that allows it to sound like a tube DAC, which sounds just makes it sound worse. And yeah, then it has another setting called WAP, which I don't know if they know about like the term outside of Korea. But yeah, they've got the WAP and the WAP X, and that's the Reverser audio processing, which is like their own special like DSP for DAC thing that they do. That I also don't like that much. It's a very odd DAC, and so far I haven't managed to make it sound very good. It also rings a little bit, and this is like I think it's $8,000 or $9,000. This thing, Australian dollars. So it's not cheap. So it's I don't think it's competitive with the stuff at its price point, which will be like May at its price point type thing. But
Ooh.
no, I'll keep playing with it and see. I haven't. There's no final word on the reverse, so maybe I've got to try run it out of its own. It's a streamer. It's like an all-in-one. So I've run it
Ah.
through. I've run it through AES. I've run it through USB and fail. And
Ah.
I think I have to run it through the Ethernet and then run it as a Rune endpoint. And that way, then I can't blame anything that I have like source wise or like upstream of it. Then it can be like it's only its own fault if it still sounds bad, and I give up.
Did you feel like something like the Shanling EM5? I don't know if you've heard that, but
Channeling. No, I don't think I've heard that. Let me Google that.
because
What's
that's
the
also a streamer.
what's the
That's like an
price on the
all-in-one.
what's the price on the Abbas?
The bus, I think it's like 2,500 dollar dues. It's like 1,700 USD.
Dollar
That's not bad.
reduce.
That's not bad. How did it compare to your Rockna?
Oh, I placed it. You should read the review because
Okay,
that's
I'll
always
check
the
it
best.
out.
But I think I put it. It traded blows. In some regards, it traded blows. It's really engaging and has like awesome Pratt. Like you know what Pratt is? Like
Yep.
it has just the timing and
Rhythm.
the rhythm and stuff. The timbre on the DAC is good, but it's not the end word in detail. Its staging's quite narrow because it's a NOS DAC and it's tubey. I couldn't get it to sound. If I did get it to sound wide, it would sound too diffuse, and then it would usually be at the cost of something else. It's the ultimate tinkerer's DAC because it's a chameleon with whatever source you put in front of it, it sort of becomes. And then whatever tubes you put in it seem to really change its performance pretty crazily as well. Particularly the rectifier tube as just seems to really make it go all kinds of different directions. So it's the kind of DAC that you could spend like years trying to milk every little last drop of performance out of and having a lot of fun because the DAC is really engaging. It's really fun to listen to, but it's not really that technical. So
People, I
yeah,
think that would be an ideal starting point. That's like the hardest part to get.
I think it would be a great DAC to actually start on for someone who's, I don't know, maybe tinkered with audio a bit before and wanted to get something a bit different, but wanted something they could really play with and get some more performance out of. I think it would be really fun to do that with.
So not like a beginner's DAC, but like someone who wants to resist the temptation to buy other stuff.
But someone who's really late in the hobby, who's like, I think it's a lot of fussing around, and it's hard to get it to sound its maximum, and then its maximum probably isn't better than some other stuff. So it reminded me a lot of my Sonic Frontiers DAC that I had when I first started the hobby, which is a tube DAC with a tube output stage. I didn't have to do as much tinkering with it to get performance out of it, but I did have to send it away from mods, and I did have to really work on getting a clean source to it because it's an ancient DAC. It doesn't have USB in, so I was like messing with when I first started my hobby, I was messing with DDCs.
Oh yeah.
Digital to digital converters, which is something that I feel like you don't kind of want to do until you're fairly deep in the hobby, because it's a bit of a rabbit hole, that whole
It
DDC led, because they all have sounds and stuff as well. So now you're introducing, the sound of whatever DDC you have, and then whatever transport you have with digital transport or off ramp or something. Then you've got the DAC itself, and then you've got your other gear. So I don't know.
You're always wondering if you're getting truly what was the performance of the device, or is it hampered by the chain you've had to create? Yeah, I had that stage too.
Exactly. So it throws you into that the finding yourself stage. And I think that's why I wouldn't want someone who's like, oh yeah, I've just started the hobby, I'm gonna get this DAC, because I feel like it's more for like someone who knows they're committed to the audiophile journey and really wants to try and find their sound a bit better. I think the Albus would be a really good DAC to get. But yeah, if you're really just starting out, or if you've been in the game for a long time, I don't think it's good enough to be like someone's end game. Honestly, I don't think it can be someone's end game. But I heard the 2.3 special edition. There is now three series and a 4.1. There's like a lot of iterations of this DAC, and much higher end ones than the one I heard. So I'm talking about specifically the 2.3 special edition, which I've linked to Smod in the DAC thing, and then he always looks at I have like a DAC ranking list that I seem to be known for these days. And I think I put it 13th, which is like, yeah, I put it 13th, which is like, oh, okay, that's not that great. But like, I put it above DACs like the Dave, DACs like Pavane, DACs like the DCS Bartok, the PS Audio Direct Stream. So I put it above that. I put it above DACs that cost 5 to 7 times as much as it. But this is my preferences as well. Like, I always try to have the caveat or the clause saying that I value transience and edge and dynamics, right, over staging. So for me, even though Abbas has really terrible staging, which for some people could be an instant deal breaker, it was so engaging and energetic that I was just like, yes, this is fun. I want to listen to this. And even though Bartok's probably, a better, well-rounded sort of sound, it was so boring that I just it's just like, no, I'm not putting this in like the top 20. Like, this is just, no, it's not making it. I'll put it below Bifrost.
Oof.
So the Abbas flagship, is it the 4.1 SE, or do you know which one? What's their top model?
I believe it's the 4.1 SE. I'm trying to get it because the Abbas 2.3 to get to 13th, right? Like, I think that's amazing. I think it could easily be in my top 10. The better ones. I also finally ranked Mola Mola. The dealer didn't send me Mola Mola, the second one, so I just yeeted and threw it on the list. I've heard it 3 times now. I've heard it with my own gear. I just really wanted to do an at-home demo because, again, it's one of those DACs where it really changes with the source, but Mola Mola is unique in that it really changes with the input. So you can feed it the same input from the same transport, but if you feed it USB AES or SPDIF, you get a very different sound. Like, I don't know, again, probably the hardware DDC sort of thing happening on board there.
Right.
But yeah, I think they did it on purpose because you can kind of like tune the DAC depending on what input you use, which is, a new level of,
more tweaking.
More tweaking for the tweak heads, but I do think it's a very good DAC. It's a bit cold and sterile, so I think you need to put warmth in front of them, the Timbaki Mola Mola DAC. But if you in the right system, I think it's good. But yeah, it's a bit cold, a bit sterile, but in the right system, you can make it sound very good. And that's an all-in-one DAC. That DAC does a lot. It's got a preamp, it's got a streamer, it's a Rune core. Oh no, it might just be a Rune endpoint. Sorry, it's a Rune endpoint. But yeah, it's a lot of DAC for the money, the Mola Mola. So for it to be ninth, and the only DACs above it are insanely expensive, pretty much. So yeah, I think that's pretty good.
Nice.
It's always
Sounds
exciting to
good.
get a review like that.
Yeah.
We're joined by Com Sizzle, our very esteemed guests, never been on the show. Do you want to just introduce yourself and tell us about yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm Kamzi. My real name is Sam from Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Hi, Sam.
Yo. Um, I started getting into audio inadvertently, probably when I was around 14. Uh, without even knowing it, I was rolling Skull Candy earbuds and finding ones that I just preferred more. Brings me to about 19, where I actually jumped on HeadFi. For frame of reference, I'm 30 now. And I started asking around, and I guess the first quote-unquote hi-fi headphone I owned was M50 ATX, or whatever they're called, the Audio-Technica DJ headphone. And then I upgraded to like a Fio amp, and then I kind of went crazy in the first 1 to 2 years of the hobby.
Whoa.
I got HD800. I also got a full Stax kit, Stax 009, with a
Ugh.
Molnar
Whoa.
KG SSHV carbon amp.
That's a
Paired
lot of
that,
dollar reduce.
right. And I paired that with the Yggdrasil A1. I sold that 6 months later. And have slowly been building my audio portfolio for the next 8 years, going much slower at it. And currently, right now, the big pieces I own, Elakit 8600 300B, just received that 2 weeks ago. I have an Ear Yoshini DAC 6922 output stage. Actually PCC 88, 7.2 volt heater. I bought that from Goodfellow Brencho on SBAF. He highly
Great fellow,
regrets.
Brencho.
Yeah, I made him regret selling it to me. And then I have a Zodiac, Antelope Zodiac DAC Pro Audio Company, a custom Pentode headphone amplifier, Lee Audio F15s, which are really popular around SV right now, Omega speakers, which are an Alnico Hempcone, HD800, of course. That's the one consistent thing I've owned for the past, honestly, 8 years now is HD800. And I'll just keep it at that because I mean it's a mountain, but I'll keep it at that for introduction.
Those are the things you're mainly still using, and the influential ones, I guess, you've had along the way. Cool. Yeah, I mean that's quite a collection. I feel like a lot of people, don't get that far in like 5 years or 10 years. So it's pretty cool that you may feel like you have really dove in deep, but at the same time, man knows how to YOLO.
I should say, first and foremost, I am a vacuum tube fanatic. I am currently using a Art Tube microphone preamp that I just linked with
Nice.
a studio headset that has a 3-pin condenser mic attached to it. Into a what do they call it? Jill, which is their ADC. Huge into tubes. I've owned a lot of more tube amps than SS. I just recently, which I get actually tomorrow, is
Oh
a
boy.
Tandberg amp, which Parker, I'm sure he's been, if not on this podcast, talked about a lot on it. He's our resident tech around that hangs out around here.
Yeah, very
Um,
active Sonic Visions contributor.
yes, and he,
Timbre
as
fanatic.
he's a Tandberg fanatic, so I finally took the dive. And he kind of hyped me on the concept of lateral MOSFETs, which I didn't even know was a thing. I just posted an image to voice gen, but essentially they're like vertical MOSFETs, but better. I don't know, but it's pretty cool. So that's gonna be hopefully what changes my mind after 10 years. I dived into solid state. I mean, carbon, the stack amp was solid state. I owned a. It was really popular for like 6 months to a year. Some Chinese silver solid state amp. Oh man, I couldn't even remember what it was called. Um, I bought. Man, this guy made a YouTube video about a Denon AVR. Man, what was this thing called? AVC 2000 maybe? No. I wonder if I could go to my email and look at it. Well, it's just a data point to say that like I watched this YouTube video and this guy hyped this Denon amp, solid state amp, PMA 2000R. That's what it was.
You had to have it.
And well, it's like this was about 4 years ago, and I just wanted to take another jump into SS because
Hmm.
I never liked it. And this seemed decent because it had these giant output transformers, made in Japan. It was a model Denon only sold to Japan predominantly.
Hmm.
And it was just terrible. It was really, really bad.
What about it was bad? Did you feel like it was dry and uninvolving? Did you feel
It
like
was uninvolving, low dynamics, low energy, low resolution, no clarity, no air.
Man, I've
Um,
completely given up on solid state for headphones. Like, I don't know why people are still
and I was using
messing
it for
around with.
speakers too. Like I bought that
Yeah.
for my TV speakers, which I replaced with a tube amp, a Wilson 10 R8 push pull, which I highly do not recommend getting for anybody out there, but it does the job. So anyways,
Oh,
I
wait.
just kept hearing bad SS, and now this Tandberg might finally be like the ticket. It feels like from
Coda is the answer, man.
yeah, Coda is like the big budget answer. So is Dart Zeal for even a bigger budget answer. And of course, Pass, their big budget stuff is great, but it's just so hard to get SS right.
I hope someday to have a big budget.
Well, I'll send you an amp, and I will give you $1,000, Comsy, if I can buy this amp off you for the $1,000 discount. I'll send this to you. That makes it pretty cheap. Have a look.
Oh my gosh. I mean,
Wheeling and dealing live, folks.
to be quite honest though, what is this called?
Sonic Frontiers Power 3.
I would actually rather own.
I just want you to own it so that I can get you to send it to PCX for me and they can send it to Australia. And then I can buy it now and my girlfriend won't know about it for a long time.
Dude, yes. Tubes for hi-fi definitely is what I would go for pentodes nowadays. Even though, to be clear, I have not heard one. They have amazing reviews from trusted contributors around the Discord and forums online. I can't see Sonic Frontiers being better than that.
Which one are you talking about?
Honestly, I mean the ST70 if you don't need the power, or the ST120 if you want the power. I mean the Sonic Frontiers obviously, I don't know, what does this ad say for how many watts? It's obviously gonna have more watts, but it's like
200 and oh no, that's the output.
who needs that many watts?
Yeah, it's got about 1% THD as well. But I've heard good things, but no one's really had ears on it that I trust. So that's another reason I kind of want you to get it.
I mean, it looks cool. It's probably only class A up to like 50 watts, if I had to guess, if it's even that at all. But I've never heard a high power tube amp in my life. They're typically reserved again in that higher echelon of price range that, you see them for like 40, 50, 60K, and they have like, 16 pentodes per pair. I have no idea how those types of amps would sound. They're intriguing though.
They are intriguing.
I'm a huge DHT fan, as you know, though. Directly heated triodes are very nuanced. 300B is not my favorite, but it just fits a market that you can't really avoid, which is what what is available in DHT that isn't 20,000 but can actually power a decent amount of speakers, and that's 300B. 2A3, yeah, you can power speakers with it, but you got to have you got to pair it with a speaker. 4 watts max out of 2A3 pair. It's just not that much. 300B at 8 watts, and especially 300B clips. I don't know about 2A3 because I never pushed it hard, but 300B clips beautifully. So it's spec'd for 8 watts, but if you want to jam up that power a little bit, it's
Yeah,
got headroom.
Yeah.
My I've wanted an 845 amp for at least 5 years now, but it's a tricky one because there's two things. It's like, do you go 845 or 211? 211, from what I've read, is more euphonic and mid-rangey. 845 is more linear. Maybe it sounds more like a 2A3.
It's so hard though because I mean there's probably like only 4 or 5 211 tube amps with like reviews out there, and they probably mostly share the same transformer. So you might get people saying that the 211 is really, more euphonic sounding, but it could just be that the pairing with the transformer that they've chosen, or the couple of amps that you're talking about, have that sound, but other tube amps might not. Like, how 300Bs these days as well, like some of the new stock 300Bs do not sound bloomy. They can actually sound very linear and kind of more like 203s. Like the Elrog. The Elrog's like nothing like the normal 300Bs. It's just a totally different animal.
Yeah,
And even and in the Ellie kit too. Like in the Ellie kit, it doesn't sound super wet and bloomy like 300B can. It's actually really quite nice and linear.
right. And it's actually, if you've been keeping up with it, Holy, El Chef, and maybe even Sunny have been running their 300Bs with a 5K primary. And you can run 300B with anything from like 2.5 to 5K. The most typical you'll see in a majority of 300B amps is anywhere from 3 to 3.5K. The Ella kit uses a 3.5K. But the higher you go with the primary, the more linear and rigid it's going to sound. From again what those 3 people have told me, they're running. I know at least 2 of those people are running their 300Bs at 5K. I don't know if I would personally be a fan of that, but yeah, it's a thing.
All right. So let's get into the topics for today. We'll just do a few of them, and then we'll see how everything works out with time. Nick's here. Nick's here as well. Nick, how are you doing?
Okay, I'm doing well. How's everybody today?
Good.
Hey,
good.
Nick, welcome.
Sorry I'm showing up late.
No, that's all right. That's all right.
We had more time to give Kanzi a really good introduction.
Oh, good.
Yes.
The first topic is about bass drivers and the size of them. whether it's in a speaker or any kind of stand mount, or if we're talking about subwoofers either. Do you find that in general, smaller drivers are quote unquote faster, or is it the case that it really depends on the the motor and that kind of thing? What's your thoughts on that? That's a common kind of thought that small, like the rel guys always kind of talk about small drivers, small is faster. It's going to be more precise than these big woofers or big subs that are kind of slower. Is it that simple, or is there more nuance there? Can a big woofer sound detailed and fast?
Well, I have a pretty basic kind of like theoretical start that I'd love to hear you guys expand on. If you guys don't mind me kind of starting off.
Have a go, mate.
Awesome. Thanks. Okay. So in general, one of the most repeated things in audiophilia, especially among bass lovers, is that there's no replacement for displacement. So you can get displacement, moving more air. If you think about, I think it was Socrates in the bathtub or whatever, Eureka, pushing more air. You can do that by having a larger driver, as in this circumstance, it would be wider and it can just push more air that way, or a smaller driver that can have more excursion, meaning it moves forward and backward more, pushing air kind of more in a linear fashion than over a larger surface area. So you pretty much have to trade between surface area and excursion, and that's your factors for doing it. And of course, when it comes to movement, inertia is important. You get some extended decay and ringing sometimes when you have a larger mass. But I don't know. I mean, a lot of people really, you could say that dynamic drivers are often a poster boy or a poster child, genderless, for more excursion, and they're generally well liked. And then you have some other types like planars or electrostats, which don't have as much excursion, but they try to make up for it by having a larger size. And they generally don't have much. They're lighter than air, and they don't have very much mass to try to make up for how much surface area they're moving. So I would generally think that it equals out in a little bit, but I think that when you have lower mass, your highs may have a little bit less distortion. That's where you see, in quick rapid movements, I think that's where you see a lot of benefit to less blurring and such, and that balances out what details may have been masked by the bass. However, this is all very theoretical. I think that generally, we usually use full range drivers are usually larger drivers, and there's a lot of practice that has gone into the decisions made. So I'd love to hear, how would you expand on that? And where did I go wrong?
Comsy can hit it.
Comedy.
Well, if nobody's going to speak up, I've had
Go
some.
ahead.
I've had some experience with both 8-inch subs and 15-inch subs, and the 8-inch had one active and one passive cone in it, and it was, let's see, one, two. Yes, that's correct. And they were very quick, articulate. I had a set of them stacked, and they were very responsive and enjoyable to listen to the 2-channel. The larger 15-inch were the dual 15s with a plate amp of 1750 watts. And that's a lot of air to move, as you were saying, in a very large box that's sealed, by the way. We didn't even touch on sealed or baffled subs.
Yeah, I believe we'll get into that.
Yeah, right. You can't help but do that. I love them. They're quick. I don't believe they're as quick as the 8-inch, even with all that power behind it. They do move a lot more air. Depends on the type of music. If you're jamming to bass heavy, yeah, you want that big monster. If uh, if you want to listen to organ music, which I do on occasion with those low tones, you
Oh, I just
definitely
found an awesome track. Remind me later to tell you guys.
okay. Yeah, you cannot replace like we say in motors, cubic inches or cc's, whatever you want to measure by. You
Mm-hmm.
can't replace it. That 8-inch sub or even a pair of them is not going to produce the low octaves that that big one's going to. So it all comes down to what do you want? Because I think there's compromise in every piece of audio gear that's ever been created. And I don't think there's anything that can make every single person happy that has a discerning ear. I mean, we all know, you can fool some people that just aren't that critical of their sound, and they'll be happy with lesser gear than what we would be. So I feel just a lot of it has to do with what you want. Can a big massive sub or woofer move as quickly? If it does have the excursion and the power behind it, yeah, I think so. But you got to have some serious weight. When I say weight, power behind it to make it do that. You don't need so much in the 8-inch. No, I'm sorry, they were 10-inch and no 8-inch and 12-inch cubes. They were they were just amazing for what they cost, the size of them, and the relatively small amount of power that was used to drive them. So, is there an answer to your question? No, as far as I'm concerned.
But it's
Yeah,
fun to experiment.
I'm sort of with Nick. It's I think it's just always like anything, a bit of a preference thing. I'm a big fan of horn loaded woofers. I find that they tend to displace a lot more air than their size, and then I sort of agree with Nick. Their saying is there's no replacement for displacement. So the bigger the woofer tends to be, I don't know, it tends to be better as long as the motor can handle it. Especially if you've got, class D or an active woofer where everything's sort of tuned to handle massive swings on the woofer. It can be really, really good. I don't like downward firing woofers on speakers. Typically, the speakers I've heard that have that as a feature, I've never been a big fan of very much. I prefer sealed subs to open subs. The rhythmic subs and the big rel subs I've heard a few times. Really, the SVS stuff's pretty good. Yeah, I think it's just a preference thing, the woofers on my drivers I think they're 15-inch or so. They're freaking huge, and I kind of like the fact that when I listen to stuff like Hans Zimmer and there's huge bass swings, the woofers don't even move. Like they
like the
don't even.
Interstellar soundtrack, or
Yeah, the Interstellar, the Batman soundtrack, stuff like that. Like the woofers,
I guess all of his stuff.
I can't get any sort of movement in the woofer because it just doesn't need to move that much to render those sort of massive deep notes. Whereas when I used to have my A77Xs, which have like a carbon fiber 7-inch bass driver, that thing would excurt like nothing else. Like it would be actually impressive to watch it like thudding away trying to, generate the SPL in the room or like trying to render what was being played to it. Both were good, both had their merits, but I kind of just like knowing that I'm not rolling off other than what the speaker wants to roll off, whereas I feel like with the smaller drivers you get a roll off from a physics perspective. It's just it physically cannot do some of the stuff that, when it drops down to 20 hertz. Not many speakers can even get close to that,
Mm-hmm.
But if you have a big woofer and they haven't rolled it off as hard as the ATC do, you'll get down there. But ATC also roll off their bass, I'd say at around 40 hertz. It does technically go down to 20 hertz, but around 40 and probably down to 30 hertz ATC don't let the woofers kind of go into that realm. So then that kind of tightens stuff up anyway. So you get that tightness of a smaller woofer because it's not trying to do the real deep stuff. So I think if you want Casmic bass, sometimes you need to put a dedicated subwoofer in to get that cinematic type, the 20 hertz and below stuff. You almost need a subwoofer. There's not many standalone speakers that will get down there comfortably.
I don't know of any that'll get down to 20. As far as speakers, you'd have to go definitely dedicated sub.
So what would you guys say is the kind of clear advantage, if any, of smaller woofers? Do you subscribe to the notion that smaller woofers in general are faster sounding and blend well? Let's say smaller subwoofers blend better with speakers or stand mounts, or is that not the case and it just depends?
I think we were kind of saying it's not the case and it depends. Like a smaller woofer essentially has to be able to have a longer excursion. It has to be able to move further in and out. And as long as you can do that without losing, I suppose if you have a really small speaker and you're getting a lot of excursion, then you start to run into issues where the driver might start wobbling and losing that smooth, linear, straight and forward and back movement. If it starts wobbling at all, you have a lot of signal breakup and distortion. So, yeah, it could be a challenge the smaller you go. But headphones can produce really low frequency sounds in their smaller enclosures and things. So it kind of depends on the system. There's probably a way to do it. Anyone else agree or say different?
No, I think you're pretty much right there. Yeah, I don't really want to. I feel like sometimes if you're monitoring, it's nice to have a smaller speaker with a smaller woofer because you really can hear the mid-range better where there is no sort of, even the upper bass doesn't sort of eat into the mids. So sometimes from a detail perspective, I feel like you get a rawer experience with your mids and treble where there's less bass. The bass just doesn't eat into that space at all. But then, that's okay for I guess mixing and mastering, but when you start going to do playback, that's probably why
For enjoyment.
For enjoyment, you kind of want a bigger speaker that actually renders the entire frequency response.
Right. I'd be interested in how much distortion we actually enjoy, we like, because sometimes you can have plenty of bass amplitude. There's enough decibels of it, but we like a little bit of bloom. We like a little bit of decay that kind of feels like a larger room, that wash of sound over us that just just whoa. So,
yeah, 100%. I think people do like a bit of distortion in their bass and a little bit of harmonics and stuff being introduced,
which may come from our training as people that went to the theater. That you were talking earlier about that cinema sound. The theater is it's kind of like the bus or the train of sound transportation, because it's meant for a large number of people to hear it. It's a really big room, so it's going to inevitably be more boomy than a near field monitor from a studio or a carefully dampened listening room. So we're trained to get excited with that big bloomy sound, and so it's not necessarily bad, but I don't know. I guess that does kind of give some credit to Asmad's idea that maybe a really big driver in a really small room might be too much, and might be a lot of mass to handle cleanly. So I don't know. There could be some merit to it.
No, I like this topic on theater because I just finished listening to, I don't know if you guys have heard the podcast run by Dallas Taylor called 20,000 Hertz. It's on Spotify. And
sounds like a Jules Verne novel. I like it.
It's he was sort of going through, the THX sound, the huge organ massive note that everybody knows, like yes, that note.
THX deep note.
The deep note, exactly. It's called the deep note, and it's a very interesting story about the production of that note and about what THX did at the time. Because THX is like a George Lucas project, and the guy who actually made the deep note was an engineer who basically designed one of the first digital signal processors. So he basically made 100 instruments make 100 noises at the same time, and he was one of the first people to do that. And that's what the deep note actually is. The problem is he randomly generated the instrument. So the original deep note is not actually the deep note that we hear today, because they lost that one and they had to remake it a few times. So it's a really interesting story, about how theaters sort of had to get to THX's standard and what kind of pull that George Lucas actually had as well
Yeah.
to tell cinemas, like, we're not releasing to you unless
not
your
good enough.
speakers are THX standard, because he was so emphatic that the sound had to live up to his standard, because he was like, no, theaters have, like, you know, Western Electric were like the glory days back in, like, when they first had cinemas, because the sound was so important. So these huge horn setups and these massive things. So
And
then
the music was so important to the Star Wars trilogy.
Yeah,
and
well,
arguably, Indiana Jones.
Yeah, so that was a huge reason that, you know, that's why the sound was so massive in those movies, was because George Lucas was like, this has to be like a talking point of how good the music actually is in our stuff. So it's a 2018 podcast. It's called The Deep Note. I will chuck it on the podcast link. I don't know, Smod wants to like show people that.
Definitely would like to listen to it myself. And what was the name of the podcast again? Do you remember?
20,000 hertz. So it's really well done, and the audio quality is fantastic. You know how often, like, even our podcast, our audio quality is probably pretty terrible for a bunch of guys who are
gaming headset. That's true.
I know, I'm on like a condenser microphone, and you can hear the cicadas like in the distance. So anyway, have a listen to that one. It's a really interesting listen. It has a lot to do with early DSP and its invention, and how, you know, they used to have to build a room of computers to make a DSP sound, and now we have DSPs that are like built into motherboards that allow you to, you know, or you can download software that does what this guy had to physically build and program. It would take him months, but it's just very interesting to hear the story, because it's they talk about lots of really powerful sounds that we all know and that we've all heard, and then where they came from and what they mean. It's a really, really good podcast for audio nerds.
Yeah, I think I remember watching it some time ago. Probably last, I forget how many years ago, but yeah, it's a lot of people think of Star Wars when they think of Lucasfilms. He is responsible for transforming theater in the world. I mean, just like you said, he found that theaters were just trying to make money hand over fist and weren't worried about the quality of whatever it was being viewed and heard. They just figured, well, you get to watch it. You know, the sounds, it's there and you can understand what they're saying. That's all you need. And Lucas was like, no, you just don't get it. Sound is half of the quality of the theater itself. And that's why he said, if you don't do it, it's not going to happen there. You're not going to get on that gravy train. And that's why so many did do it, because they saw he really is a genius.
He forced him. He forced him. He said, I'm not releasing to you unless you're THX certified.
Absolutely. Do it or forget it.
Do it or forget it. And so, like, hundreds of cinemas had to go and, like, you know, drop big coin getting their speakers up to standard. And even his audio production sort of he went and had a look at one of the areas where they're doing production stuff, and apparently they had like these old, you know, white box speakers. One had a rug over it, one was facing the wrong way, and he was just like, this is just no.
Wait,
the wrong way.
He's still transforming theater to this day. I mean, look at the Mandalorian, that room that they're using now. I mean, that's part of, you can call it Disney, but it was driven by Lucas and his people.
Yeah, and a lot of audio innovation has come out of the studios that Lucas has backed,
Yep.
to create sound. So it's really interesting to. I never knew any of this up until about a week ago, and I heard this podcast, and I was like, holy crap! I did not realize that like George Lucas has done so much for the audio community and for like audio enthusiasts with like the cinema experience and even just the recording and quality of music in movies. Basically, it was Lucas that said like we are not doing well enough to make this immersive, even for the at-home person who has probably better speakers than some people had in the production studio. So he was just like, no, we have to ramp it up. We have to make the sound as good as the cinema experience. The image experience. I mean,
absolutely. Is anybody here a teenager when the first Star Wars movie came out?
Does it count the special edition?
No, I'm talking about the original release.
No, but I did get to see the original in theater because of the special edition.
Okay, I was there at the original release. I'm old. I was there at the original release, and you could hear a pin drop as far as audience goes, because we all sat there with our jaw on the ground because of the sights and sounds. It's as if seeing color or hearing sound for the first time. That's what Lucas did to theater as far as a film and sound. It was like being on another planet. It was that incredible. You can't relive that experience, and you can't do it justice trying to describe it like I am now, because I'm not that colorful with words. But even the most articulate person in the world, I don't think could give you even a hint of what it was like to be in that theater on that evening. And it came on, you're like, what a long time ago, and you just, the jaw dropped, and that was the end of it. You were teleported to another world in another time. It was that amazing. So to see it, these kids nowadays, or kids, you even, some of you
call
guys,
me a kid. I like that.
you grew up with it, and it's so easy to take it for granted, but it's like inventing fire almost. It was that crazy.
Well, I don't claim to know what it was like at the end of the 70s. I actually really that would have been something I would have loved to have experienced firsthand. But I do kind of feel like there was a second de-evolution and a second revolution when we went from MP3s becoming so popular and widespread.
Sure.
To people getting back to CDs, high res, vinyl. There was that period where I grew up. I played in the orchestra, so I got to hear some really good timbre and stuff. But I mostly had access to MP3s, and so then when I finally was like, "Oh wait, no, this is amazing enough, entertaining enough that it can hold my full attention," that might reach some millennials. Maybe it's kind of like a similar experience, but yeah, when you combine a movie, the sound and the visual, I envy you. That must have been like a very cool, almost coming of age experience.
Yeah, it really was. I was trying to think of what else can compare it to in a person's life, and I don't know. Maybe sex for the first time, but even
Your
then,
virginity.
it didn't last for 2 hours. Not the best part of it, at least.
I mean, you're honest, maybe too honest, but definitely honest.
Well, yeah. I mean,
I know what you mean.
I'm searching for something that could be, and it's just not. Like I said, it's like seeing black and white your whole life, and then one day somebody turned the color on. Just think of how awestruck you would be. And it was pretty much that. And then you went home and you turned on the TV, and you had that mono little speaker, and you're like, what? Yeah, right, exactly. Oh, and when the remote control came out, oh my
What do I need
God,
a little brother for now?
Gift from heaven.
Right.
Cool.
Oh,
cool.
that's cool. Oh,
All
so
right.
that was really cool discussion. What's the next topic?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry for getting
No,
off
it's
on it.
great. No, it was fun. You know it was fun.
Yeah. I'm sitting here with the biggest smile, like I just watched the movie.
That's good. Yeah, the next topic is about speaker cabinets and baffles, and specifically traditional speakers versus open baffle speakers. There's the totally open type of speakers, like for example, Spatial Audio makes, like their Sapphire speakers, and then there's also the partially open speaker, like Nola makes, where they have a closed woofer cabinet, and then the other kind of the mid range and treble are open. What are your experiences with these types of open speakers or semi-open speakers? What are the pros and cons? What are your thoughts on them?
Hang on,
Anybody?
let me have a look at the question again. Where's the topics? Because that was.
Since it got quiet, I'm just going to say I've never heard an open baffle, so I won't have any input for you there. So
Yeah, I've never heard a good open baffle either, so I've been waiting to hear the Pure Audio project stuff. So I don't know. I feel like in this topic, I don't know enough. I like the idea of open baffle. It sounds pretty cool. It's sort of somewhere between an infinite baffle and like being soffit mounted and a traditional sort of baffle. But no, I don't know enough to really comment. Sorry.
Okay, that's
This,
okay. Yeah,
this
sorry.
might be something I would want to hear. Smod seems to have the most experience on it. I would want to ask how related or not related is it with my experience is headphones. How is it related with open and sealed headphones?
Yeah,
I mean, a
I
baffle
guess
is not
I guess
open, but yeah.
that's a good way of pivoting the topic, I think, because all of us, I think, probably have experience with open and closed headphones. So that's a interesting way of pivoting. I did hear the Emerald Physics open baffled speakers, and it was quite good actually. I really liked it. I liked how open it sounded. It had a powered woofer section, so the bass was actually quite nice as well. But I don't have a ton of experience with open baffle or semi open baffle. One of our viewers, one of my friends, his name is Manthic, and he has the Nola, the gold grand concerts, and he's been emailing. I've been telling him to come on the show, but he's, I think, a bit shy, and he's been emailing me about about our topics and his thoughts and that kind of thing. And he just loves them. He thinks they're incredible, and I think that the Nola design is interesting because if you think about it, I mean, one of the main disadvantages of open baffle will always be that you don't have that closed chamber to develop that or produce that deep bass. And with an open baffle, it's harder to do that. Whereas in the case of the Nola, they've closed off the woofer chamber, so you have the deep bass, but then they've opened up the treble and mid range, so maybe there's potentially more air there. I also heard the what were like the name is escaping me, the one that's a kind of like a 360 type of one. You know what I'm talking about, right? The hi-fi one. I forgot the name of them. Not Bayes Audio, not that one. But there's another famous maker who makes like a 360 type of speaker, and that one I wasn't a huge fan of because it just seemed like the imaging was too diffuse.
Right. And it's going to bounce off all your walls. Of course, it's diffuse.
Yeah.
Is it like the one where the driver's kind of just like suspended above the box enclosure? I've seen some do-it-yourself people that have tried to release ones like that.
I think it might have been, yeah, it might have been that. It's a really famous, well-known company. I'm just blanking on the name, but yeah, yeah.
Well, it seems like we're all blanking too, so it's not just you.
Well, let's quickly touch on open and closed headphones, I guess. I mean, we talked about it before. We can move on if we don't want to. But actually, you know what? Let's move on because we've talked about that many times before. I want to get to the next topic, and let's make this the final one.
Me too.
Yeah,
I like that topic.
I knew I could sense it, Zach, so don't worry. I got you. So the next one, I really like this topic, and some people might not like the way I phrased it. I know a lot of people get mad when people say musicality. I personally like that term, but basically, this was inspired by me listening to an Audio Excellence YouTube clip or YouTube video today, where they talked about the concept of an audiophile versus a music lover, and what they were saying is an audiophile is, and I'm not saying I agree with them, but what they were saying is, or the way they were painting it, is that the audiophile is somebody who, strives for ultimate transparency, every last drop of detail, clarity. They want to hear, like, what they said in the video, like a artist farting in the seventh row, like, you could hear the fart, like that kind of, clarity and detail. Whereas the music lover is not so much focused on the detail as much as they are the emotional engagement and the importance of the emotions that are evoked by listening to the music. And they're not as honed in on every single little tiny nuance. It's more the overall cohesive picture of that the music presents. So I thought that this was really fascinating, and I want to get your thoughts on this, because I'll just briefly say what my experience is. My experience is that initially I was very, very focused on ultimate resolution, detail. I want to hear every single nuance, and I was a huge fan of the HD 800, and I just want to hear every single thing. And the more I heard, the better I felt. But now I'm feeling that that's not what my preference is anymore. Now my preference is really the tonality, the smoothness, the richness, and the immersive sense of the music, the sense of getting lost in the music. And for me, when the tone is right, when the music evokes something in me that transports me to the venue, that's what really, what I'm kind of chasing now is that sense of immersion. And to me, that I value kind of above the resolution, and that's what I'm trying to do with my chain. I'm kind of making tweaks and changes and things like that. So I guess my question to you guys is, what are your thoughts on that dichotomy between chasing resolution and detail versus this tone and timbre and things like that? Have you gone through any shifts in your audiophile journey from one to the other? Is it a mood thing? How do you what would the comments be there?
I mean, certainly, yeah. So who wants to go first? I have a lot I could say about this, but I don't want to take too much time. So let's do it because it gets slow.
You should
faster.
go, EV. You should go. Get on it.
Okay. Well, I mean, one of the coolest parts of when I worked at Sennheiser was actually kind of witnessing a focus group. And I'm going to preface it by saying that basically we had both of those camps of people in there, and neither of them wanted to claim the term audiophile, right? So they would say, well, I am a music enthusiast, and an audiophile is that guy who obsesses over the gear, obsesses over flea farts, and hearing the most minuscule details possible. And that's not me, and I don't like that. That's an audiophile. Whereas the other camp, who said, I just can't stand listening to something that doesn't have the detail and the stuff, because for me it feels more immersive because it's more realistic. And so emotional, an audiophile is someone who just listens emotionally. They don't really put that much thought into it. But I'm an enthusiast because I care so much to chase the dream and always try to make better. And I really don't feel like either camp is wrong, or more of an audiophile or less of an audiophile than another. I personally have went through a shift where, it was the first time I heard something that was a little bit more fidelity and a little bit more truth, that it was really exciting. It was new, and I was chasing detail, and because it felt more immersive in a sense of approaching realism. And now I'm at the venue, I'm at the musician's side, and I'm hearing this stuff. And I still really like that, and that's why I chased a lot of more reference headphones for a long time. But yeah, I definitely evolved into a more mushroom shaped. First I sought the Holy Grail. People were joking earlier; they were calling it Holy Grail because I went for an HD 800. And then, I blossomed out into a lot of different signatures to kind of explore, how do I get a sweet, sweet lie? Because sometimes, what is music but art? and art is all an abstraction anyway, and it's an aesthetic abstraction. So I personally don't believe there's a wrong answer. But yeah, certain music is so well produced that it seems to beg getting as much insight out of it as you can and recreating that moment. And other ones are a little bit more ephemeral, and you just want to experience it, and it's going to be the newness in it, the exploration in it is how can you amp up that emotion and excitement. So I think that both approaches are valid, and I think it's funny also that as far as audiophile, the term, no one wants to claim it, even though we really all do are lovers of audio.
Yeah, that's a eloquent summary. I might go next if that's okay, because I've got to
Love
I've got
it.
to go to jujitsu and do my thing.
Go ahead,
Mhm.
Zach.
All right. I don't think that these things have to be independent, but at the same time, I feel like there's always a compromise. So, yes, you can have pure resolution detail, be soulless cold, render absolutely everything, and still somehow be like unengaged and not really enjoying the sound. So, I'm one of those people that don't like the term musicality because I feel like it's just like a nothing word. Like there's a lot of nothing words in the audiophile land that are marketing words, I find, that are words that you can hide behind because they don't have enough like actual, you can't just point to an aspect of the sound and say that's what gives it musicality. It's like this broad term that can be used to enhance or to put down another product because it's not musical sounding. I'm like, well, what does it really mean? Are you talking about Pratt? Like, there's a million words to describe what you're talking about here, and yet you choose to use a word that means nothing. Why? So I like the word tone. I've been using it a lot more lately because tone can sort of, it's different from timbre or timbre, or whatever you want to call it. But tone and polytonal things have to do with how multiple instruments sound at the same time. And this is something that a lot of speakers can't render because if you use something like a horn speaker, let's say, avant-garde or something like that, and you play a piece of beautiful music, a single violinist playing, a solo piece, right? Sounds incredible. But then we say, all right, let's listen to an orchestra. And suddenly it's like, oh, it's sort of getting a bit of blending and like the polytonal stuff, it can't render too many things at the same time because usually it's only like one or two drivers and they're like usually have a very limited capacity to handle multiple tones at the same time. And the same can be true with some of the DACs and amps out there that seem to fall down in different ways. So I don't know, I feel like you've got to balance it all, and my ideal sound has exceptional timbre and tone, and that's, you don't get exceptional timbre most of the time without having pretty exceptional detail, because the thing that gives the detail from an instrument, you're listening to a Stradivari or you're listening to a beautiful piano, the timbre of how the boards rattle, how the keys sound, how the pedals sound are important, and that relies on exceptional detail to render the information around those macro sounds to give them weight and an actual give you an impression that this isn't just a cello, it is the Stradivari. It is an instrument that has a particular sound and timbre. It's not just a word saying timbre is just, oh, it sounds like a cello. It's like it sounds like a particular cello, and that's something that I think requires good detail. But yeah, hearing, the handling of the instruments in the room, that can be important to some people, but not important to others, and that's more of a macro detail thing. I don't think that's like a micro detail thing that then influences timbre. So yeah, there's my rant. I think, you need a level of timbre, of detail, sorry, to have good timbre. Tone is something that's often overlooked, and that a lot of people a lot of audiophiles tend to listen to music or present speakers in marketing terms that don't have a lot of polytonal things going on purpose. So if you ever go to an audio show, note the speakers where they only play classical, okay? Because those are the speakers I always say, okay, play Rage Against the Machine, and they look at me like disgusted. Like, why do you want to listen to Rage Against the Machine? Because polytonal, it's got incredible dynamic range, and most speakers disintegrate when playing it, you know. So I like to. That's a really good stress test for a speaker to see, can it handle polytonal things happening at the same time. Not, I mean, the timbre on the kick drums is fantastic on a lot of the Rage Against the Machine stuff too, and there's a lot of detail there too. But musicality, I don't like the word because I don't think it has meaning. To me personally, I can understand, like, if you want to say something that you want a warmer sound, or you want some bass bloom, or you want to have, you know, some roll off in the highs. Sure, that can make a sound different, and potentially more engaging. Sometimes that can be a more enjoyable experience. But I feel like we shouldn't use nothing words. We shouldn't give power to nothing words, like musical, or like, oh, transparent even is a shitty term. Like, what is transparent? Like, it's just you're just trying to use a word to say that, oh, it's not in the way, it's not existent. But again, I think there's enough good words that we should use them where we can. And if you can't, then think harder.
There you go.
Nick, any thoughts?
Yeah, can we come back to? I couldn't bring it up. Could you come back to the question once again? It was people that enjoy music versus audiophiles.
Yeah, I basically, the question is that, have you experienced in your journey a shift in what you were seeking in the sound from something like, you know, chasing resolution and detail and clarity, or whatever the, you know, term we want to use for that, versus tonality or timbre, or, you know, a beautiful mid-range or full mid-range, or, I mean, it's a very kind of dicey, controversial kind of thing. If I say a certain word, some people will say, well, what does that mean? So that's fair enough, but I hope I'm making sense. Like, did you ever shift one preference to another in your audio journey?
Well, that's I must have had a stroke, because that wasn't the original question I heard to start with. I thought
Yeah,
it
me
was,
either. Sorry.
No, I did say that. I did. But anyways, that's fine. Okay. I
Yeah,
said that towards the end. I don't know. Yeah.
okay.
Go ahead. Yeah.
The main part I heard was the difference between people that enjoy music, and, you know, as in a music enthusiast, versus an audiophile, and the differences in the
Yeah,
two.
and applying it to you. So, like, have you
Okay.
noticed yourself? That's what I was trying to get to.
Myself.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Sorry
Okay.
for not being clear. But yeah, like, apply it to yourself. What do you think? How has that affected you in your journey?
Okay, well, I have to listen better. See, we already are talking about listening better.
I should have explained it better.
No, that was humor there. My journey in music started off like most folks, and yeah, I enjoy this, enjoy that, but as far as reaching for the ultimate, there was a time when was more, I'd listen to music, enjoy it, and then I started listening a little more, and it was getting, well, can I hear that? Can I hear the spittle in that horn? You know, and one day that occurred to me, like, that's just a little much. Why don't we roll it back to where the gear's not as important, the sound isn't as important as the enjoyment of it. And, you know, and yeah, there's joy in hearing, you know, guys shuffling the papers or whatever. You hear the guy walk in the back room. Everybody loves to pick out the guy said something in a live recording in a small room that, you know, I heard him there. Did you hear him? And that's nice for discussion, but that's not about quality music. It means the recording was either done really well or really poorly, depending on how you want to look at that. But yeah, there's getting over to what Zach said about the use of the words. It kills me to hear some of these words that my father had an expression for it as a BS word. It has no meaning, so why are you using? Either get a larger vocabulary or rethink before you open your mouth. I agree with you there, Zach. Is I guess over time I've developed taste that, yeah, I appreciate the detail more, and being able to visualize the artist better. But as far as every little detail and worrying about that, I think there's a line where it goes from enjoying the music and the detail and the finer parts of the recording to, are you listening to a recording or are you listening to people creating the recording? To me, it's more important to hear the people creating the recording. If you can grasp what I'm trying to say there, it's the human person behind the music and the feeling that's put into it. I have no musical talent to pick up an instrument and play. I can sing or have sung in bands and this and that, but the dedication and the joy and the selflessness in creating music was presented more to me when I tried to learn how to play an instrument, which I have no ability to do. And it taught me so much more about music than my search down the road of listening to better music, buying better gear, improving my gear so I can hear better sounds, less muffled, less garbage, less noise, and more sound that was meant to be there. And I know it sounds like a rambling madman, but I hope you got something out of that.
Yeah, no, I definitely did. I appreciate it. So that's great. So I think that I will stop there. I really appreciate it, guys. It was a great episode. Any final thoughts?
One final thought. I finally did break down and purchase the Anita Pro. It's incredible. Got my tube amp back. So I am in heaven. I got it Wednesday, installed it Thursday, and this weekend's going to be a joy.
Nice, great. Okay, great. So
And
oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. No, it's a similar wrap up idea. I am really looking forward to seeing anybody at Can Jam New York City next weekend. That'll be a really exciting event.
Awesome.
Yeah, I look forward to any thoughts you might have on the Can Jam. Hopefully, we can have a session after, and you can tell us your thoughts on anything you've heard there and what you guys are doing at Grell Audio.
Oh, absolutely. And as long as you guys don't, Grell's basically given me permission to pull like DMS and stuff, where as long as you don't take things too seriously, because obviously I'm affiliated with one brand manufacturer. Cope with my bias. I have a lot of experience, and I'd love to share more of things, impressions.
Love to hear your thoughts. One other thing, down here in Louisiana, we are in the Mardi Gras season. So, voulez-vous bon temps rouler?
Voulez-vous bon temps rouler? Sounds good.
It means let the good times roll.
Love it.
All right, cool. Sounds good. All right, I'll see you guys next time. Take care.
Cheers.
Thanks, Mod, Zach, Sir.
Take care. Thanks,
Bye.
guys. Bye.